The emergency sirens wailed through the crystal towers of the Galactic Defense Council like screaming banshees. Council members from 12 different worlds rushed through the gleaming corridors, their various forms of feet, claws, and tentacles clicking against the polished floors. Some flew, others slithered, but all moved with the same urgent purpose that had summoned them from across the galaxy. Admiral Kethvar of the Altarian Navy stood at the center of the massive chamber, his blue-green tentacles quivering with barely contained shock. The octopus-like being had witnessed 3 galactic wars in his lifetime, but nothing had prepared him for what he was about to show the assembled representatives. "Fellow council members," Kethvar began, his voice echoing through the chambers. "Translation systems. I have called this emergency session because of an incident that threatens everything we thought we knew about galactic warfare." The massive holographic projector hummed to life, casting a 3-dimensional image that filled the center of the chamber. The assembled aliens leaned forward from their various perches, floating platforms, and breathing apparatus, their attention fixed on the display. "What you are about to witness," Kethvar continued, his tentacles now trembling visibly, "occurred 3 standard galactic cycles ago in the disputed Outer Rim territories. Our intelligence networks have only now managed to acquire this footage." The hologram revealed the vastness of space, dotted with stars that seemed like distant diamonds. Then, sliding into view with menacing grace, came the pride of the Zephyrian Empire. 50 massive dreadnoughts arranged in perfect battle formation. Each ship was the size of a small moon, their biometal hulls pulsing with organic life and crackling with energy shields that had protected them for 3,000 years. The Zephyrian vessels were legendary throughout the galaxy. They're living. Ships could repair themselves, adapt to enemy weapons, and had never been defeated in open combat. The sight of their full battle formation had been enough to make entire star systems surrender without firing a shot. Council member Zarathik, a crystalline being from the Silicon Reaches, chimed with curiosity. "Admiral, surely you didn't summon us to witness another Zephyrian victory? Their dominance is well documented." Kethvar's tentacles curled in what those familiar with Altarian body language recognized as grim anticipation. "Watch carefully, Counselor. The Zephyrians were not alone in this engagement." The hologram shifted perspective, showing the edge of the battle formation where space itself seemed to ripple. Then, with the casual elegance of a leaf falling from a tree, a new vessel dropped out of hyperspace. The ship was sleek and silver, bearing clean lines that spoke of advanced engineering. Compared to the massive Zephyrian dreadnoughts, it looked almost delicate, like a needle next to sledgehammers. Along its hull, simple characters spelled out KMS Busan in what the Council's computers identified as Korean script. "A human vessel," whispered Councillor Vexthal, his multiple eyes focusing with interest. "Their species is relatively new to galactic affairs, are they not?" On the bridge of the KMS Busan, Captain Kim Jiwoo stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching the tactical display with calm professionalism. At 28, she was young for a starship captain, but her steady demeanor and quick thinking had earned her command of what the Korean Space Force classified as a light patrol cruiser. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Park Min-ho from the tactical station, his fingers dancing over holographic controls, "we've got 50 hostile vessels in formation ahead. Classification: looks like Zephyrian dreadnoughts. Heavy configuration, full battle readiness." The bridge crew exchanged glances. They had been on routine patrol in this sector when the hyperspace sensors had detected the massive fleet. Standard protocol required them to investigate and report any unusual military activity. 50 ships, mused Commander Lee Jinwoo, the ship's first officer. "That's a significant force. Should we fall back and request reinforcements from the fleet?" Captain Kim studied the tactical display for a moment, noting the enemy formation and weapon signatures. The Busan's computer systems had already analyzed the threat and calculated optimal engagement parameters. According to the ship's tactical AI, this was well within the parameters of a standard patrol encounter. "Negative," she decided, her voice carrying the quiet confidence that had made her crew trust her judgment implicitly. "We're just here for a routine security sweep. These ships are in violation of the Neutral Zone Treaty. Let's handle this quickly and file our report." The alien observers watching the holographic recording could not have imagined the casual nature of this conversation. To them, 50 Zephyrian dreadnoughts represented an existential threat to entire civilizations. What happened next would be replayed in alien military academies for generations to come, studied and analyzed by beings who could barely comprehend what they were witnessing. The KMS Busan's weapon systems came online with smooth efficiency. What the Korean Space Force called standard plasma arrays, weapons that were considered basic equipment on human patrol vessels, began charging with power levels that made the Council Chamber's monitoring equipment overload and shut down. The first salvo of plasma beams lanced across space like brilliant blue lightning, striking the lead Zephyrian dreadnought's energy shields. The shields that had withstood 3 millennia of galactic warfare simply evaporated. The beams punched through the biometal hull as if it were tissue paper, and the massive ship simply ceased to exist in a flash of brilliant light. The alien council members watching the recording sat in stunned silence as the impossible continued to unfold before their eyes. The grand chamber of the Galactic Defense Council stretched before Captain Kim Ji-woo like a vast alien cathedral. Crystalline walls rose hundreds of meters into the air, their surfaces shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in rhythm with the heartbeats of various species present. The air itself was a carefully balanced mixture of gases, allowing beings from 12 different worlds to breathe comfortably, while sophisticated gravity fields kept everyone properly oriented according to their species' needs. Captain Kim stood at the center of it all, her black Korean Space Force uniform crisp and professional against the backdrop of alien magnificence. The silver insignia on her collar caught the strange light filtering through the chamber's prismatic dome, where 3 different suns cast their rays through the station's transparent aluminum windows. Around her, the representatives of galactic civilization arranged themselves in a perfect circle. Some floated in energy bubbles filled with methane gas, others perched on crystalline branches that grew from the living walls, and a few massive creatures rested on specially designed platforms that could support their incredible weight. Each being was a testament to the diversity of life in the galaxy, yet all shared the same expression of barely contained fear as they looked upon the human captain. Chairman Vex Thul dominated the center of the assembly, his 4-meter-tall form covered in chitinous plates that gleamed like polished obsidian. His 12 eyes arranged in 3 rows across his elongated skull, all focused on Captain Kim, with an intensity that would have made most beings tremble. When he spoke, his words came through a translation matrix that converted his subsonic rumbles into perfect Korean. "Captain Kim," the chairman began, his voice carrying the weight of civilizations, "you stand before this council accused of deploying weapons of mass destruction against a sovereign fleet of the Zephyrian Empire. The evidence suggests your vessel single-handedly annihilated 50 dreadnoughts in what can only be described as an unprecedented display of destructive power." Captain Kim's eyebrows rose slightly, her expression one of genuine puzzlement rather than the fear or defiance the council had expected. She shifted her weight slightly, a gesture so human and natural that it seemed almost alien in this chamber of cosmic politics. "Sir, with all due respect," she replied, her voice carrying the calm professionalism that had served her well throughout her career, "I'm not entirely sure what you mean. My ship and crew responded to a hostile force using standard defensive protocols. We employed our regular shipboard weapons during what was, by our standards, a routine engagement. A ripple of shock passed through the assembled beings like a wave. Several smaller creatures chittered in their native languages, while others made sounds that the translation matrix couldn't properly convert into human speech. The air in the chamber seemed to thicken with tension. Admiral Kethava, whose tentacles had been writhing with barely controlled agitation, leaned forward from his position on the council's left flank. His species, the Altarians, were known throughout the galaxy for their calm demeanor and logical thinking, but even he seemed shaken by the captain's casual response. "Captain," he said, his voice carrying undertones that suggested he was struggling to maintain his composure, "your vessel destroyed 50 of the most powerful warships in known space in exactly 17 minutes. These were not transport vessels or civilian craft. These were Zephyrian dreadnoughts, each one capable of reducing an entire planet to ash. How do you explain this level of destructive capability? Captain Kim paused thoughtfully, as if she were explaining something obvious. To a child. Well, she began, her tone remaining conversational despite the magnitude of the moment. The KMS Busan is equipped with Mark 7 plasma arrays for primary armament, quantum-guided antimatter torpedoes for heavy targets, and a basic gravitational field manipulator for defensive purposes. It's pretty standard equipment for a patrol cruiser in our fleet. The silence that followed was so complete that the ambient sounds of the space station's life support systems became audible. The whisper of air recyclers, the distant hum of power generators, and the soft clicks and whirs of automated systems, maintaining the delicate balance of life in the void. Dr. Lee Somin had been observing the proceedings from the gallery reserved for technical advisors. The xenotechnology specialist was one of Earth's foremost experts on alien technology, having spent the last decade studying the various devices and weapons systems that humanity had encountered during their expansion into galactic space. When she requested permission to address the council, Chairman Vexthal granted it with a gesture that suggested he was desperate for any explanation that might make sense of what they had witnessed. If I may, Chairman Vexthal, Dr. Lee began as she activated her portable holographic display, I believe we're dealing with a fundamental misunderstanding about the relative technological capabilities of our respective civilizations. The hologram sprang to life, showing detailed technical specifications for the weapon systems Captain Kim had described as standard equipment. The display showed energy output levels, targeting accuracy percentages, and destructive yield calculations that made several council members physically recoil from their viewing positions. What Captain Kim describes as routine patrol vessel armament, Dr. Lee continued, her voice taking on the clinical tone of a scientist presenting data, appears to exceed your most advanced theoretical weapons by several orders of magnitude. Your plasma weapons, which we've studied from the wreckage of various conflicts, operate on principles that our engineers abandoned as inefficient roughly 50 years ago. The implications of this statement hung in the air like a death sentence. Councillor Zithkar, representing the hegemony, one of the most militarily advanced civilizations in the galaxy, spoke with a voice that barely contained panic. Dr. Lee, he said, his crystalline form vibrating with frequencies that his translator rendered as barely controlled terror. If the vessel we witnessed represents standard patrol capabilities, what would you classify as your most powerful warships? Doctor. Lee exchanged a glance with Captain Kim, a moment of human communication that spoke volumes about their shared concern for diplomatic relations. The Busan. She's classified as a light patrol cruiser, suitable for routine security operations and reconnaissance missions. Our battleships are roughly 10 times her size and firepower. Our dreadnoughts. She paused, noting the growing expressions of horror on the alien faces around her. Perhaps we should discuss our fleet capabilities in a more private setting, but the damage was already done. The revelation spread through the chamber like wildfire, passed along through the various communication methods of different species. Humanity's routine patrol vessel possessed enough firepower to conquer most of their homeworlds single-handedly, and they had ships that made the Busan look like a child's toy in comparison. Captain Kim, still genuinely puzzled by the intense reaction her simple explanation had provoked, asked the innocent question that would echo through the nightmares of every species present. Are we in some kind of trouble here? Because honestly, this seems like a pretty minor incident to warrant calling an emergency session of the entire Galactic Defense Council. The realization that humans considered the complete annihilation of a legendary battle fleet to be a minor incident sent shockwaves through every corner of known space, fundamentally altering the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The stealth vessel, Silent Observer, drifted through the void like a ghost, its hull shimmering with adaptive camouflage that bent light around its crystalline surface. Commander Yulthek stood on the bridge, his six-armed form tense with anticipation as they approached the Sol system. The ship represented the combined efforts of 12 different alien civilizations, their most advanced stealth technology, sensor arrays and defensive systems all packed into a vessel designed for one purpose: spying on humanity without being detected. Initiating final approach to the human home system, reported Navigator Zixhal, her insectoid features clicking with nervous energy. All stealth systems at maximum efficiency. We should be invisible to their sensors. Commander Yulthek nodded, though privately he wondered if their definition of invisible would hold up against human technology. After witnessing what Captain Kim's routine patrol vessel had done to the Zephyrian fleet, nothing seemed certain anymore. The outer edges of the Sol system came into view on their main display, and immediately the crew knew they were in uncharted territory. What they saw defied everything they thought they knew about spacefaring civilizations. "Commander," whispered sensor specialist Kolthara, her voice barely audible through the translation matrix, "the asteroid belt, it's not natural anymore." The tactical display updated, showing what had once been a chaotic ring of space rocks, transformed into something that looked like a massive industrial complex. Automated mining ships the size of small moons moved between asteroids, harvesting raw materials with efficiency that made their own mining operations look primitive. Massive, refineries hung in space like mechanical cities, processing metals and minerals at a rate that could supply entire star systems. "By the void," Yulthek muttered, using an oath that had served his species for millennia. "Look at the scale of those operations. They're harvesting an entire asteroid belt like it's a garden." As they moved deeper into the system, the true magnitude of human industrial capability became apparent. Orbital platforms surrounded Earth like a ring of metal moons, each one larger than most alien space stations. Solar collectors stretched across millions of kilometers, harvesting energy from their star, with an efficiency that their own scientists had only dreamed of achieving. But it was when they reached Luna, Earth's moon, that the real shock began. Though Moon's surface had been transformed into something that looked like a mechanical ocean. Shipyards stretched from horizon to horizon, their construction bays filled with vessels that dwarfed anything in the galactic fleet registries. Massive robotic arms moved with precise choreography, assembling hull sections that were larger than entire alien cruisers. "Sir," Communications Officer Threndar reported, his reptilian features pale with shock. "I'm monitoring human naval communications. They're discussing routine construction schedules." The intercepted transmissions played through the bridge speakers, translated into their common language by the ship's AI. Human voices, calm and professional, discussed the completion of something, called Production Block 7, as if they were talking about building houses instead of warships. "Looks like we're ahead of schedule on the heavy patrol vessels," one human voice said casually. "We should have another 30 ships ready for deployment by next week. 30 ships in 1 week, each one potentially more powerful than anything the Galactic Council had ever fielded." Yulthek's tactical officer, a floating gas bag creature named Veltorin, updated their threat assessment display. "Commander, based on what we're observing, humans appear to be constructing warships at a rate that exceeds the combined shipbuilding capacity of all known civilizations by a factor of, I can't even calculate it properly." The stealth ship's sensors tracked the movement of completed vessels as they left the lunar shipyards. What humans classified as heavy patrol vessels were the size of alien battleships. Their system defense cruisers were larger than the legendary Titan-class dreadnoughts that only 3 species in the galaxy had ever managed to build. "Sir," the communications officer reported again, his voice now shaking with barely controlled terror, "I'm intercepting deployment orders for something called Battle Group 7. They're being assigned to what humans term minor peacekeeping operations in the Andromeda approach." The tactical display updated as their passive sensors mapped the human fleet positions throughout the solar system. Battle Group 7 materialized on their screens like a nightmare made manifest, 47 vessels of various classifications, each one radiating power signatures that their instruments could barely measure. And according to the human communications they were monitoring, this was considered a light deployment for routine patrol duties. Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, in a laboratory complex in Seoul, Dr. Choi Minji was having her own revelations about the state of galactic technology. The xeno-engineer sat surrounded by alien weapon samples, that the Galactic Defense Council had provided for analysis, hoping that human scientists might be able to explain the massive technological gap they had discovered. "This is deeply concerning," she murmured to her research assistant, Dr. Park Dong-yun, as she examined a Zephyrian plasma cannon that was considered one of the most advanced weapons in known space. Their plasma containment system is using magnetic field principles that we abandoned in the early 21st century. Park looked up from his examination of an alien shield generator, shaking his head in disbelief. "Minji, this shield matrix is so primitive that I'm genuinely worried about these species' ability to defend themselves against even basic threats. A first-year engineering student could breach this with equipment from our university lab." The Zephyrian shield that had protected their fleet for 3,000 years lay disassembled on the laboratory table, its components spread out like the innards of an ancient clock. To human eyes, it was a fascinating example of how alien minds had approached the problem of energy deflection, but its actual effectiveness was roughly equivalent to armor plating from Earth's medieval period. "How have they survived this long?" Park wondered aloud, examining the crystalline matrix that formed the shield's core. "Their energy distribution is so inefficient that most of the power is just being wasted as heat." Dr. Choi pulled up holographic displays showing the technical specifications of various alien weapons systems. Each one told the same story: civilizations that had reached space travel through different evolutionary paths, but had somehow stagnated technologically for millennia, while congratulating themselves on incremental improvements to fundamentally flawed designs. Back in space, Commander Yultek was compiling his final intelligence report, a document that would reshape the political landscape of the galaxy. The evidence was overwhelming and terrifying. Humanity possessed not just superior individual ships, but an industrial capacity that could outproduce the entire Galactic Council combined. "Sir," his navigation officer reported, "we're detecting massive fleet movements throughout the human system. It appears they're preparing for some kind of large-scale operation." The tactical display updated to show thousands of human vessels moving into formation throughout the Sol system. The sheer number was staggering, more ships than most alien civilizations possessed in their entire combined fleets. "What's the nature of their operation?" Yultek asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. "According to intercepted communications," the officer replied, "they're conducting routine fleet exercises, something they call light weapons testing, involving over 3,000 vessels, 3,000 ships, for a training exercise, using weapons they considered light." Commander Yulthek's final report would contain a conclusion so terrifying that several council members would require medical attention after reading it. One human battle group possessed more firepower than the combined fleets of the entire Galactic Defense Council. And Earth maintained over 200 such battle groups, with more being constructed every day at a pace that defied comprehension. The intelligence reached the Council just 3 days before humanity's scheduled fleet exercises were set to begin. Exercises that would demonstrate the casual deployment of enough firepower to conquer half the known galaxy. Across the stars, every species that had ever considered themselves a military power began to recalculate their position in a universe where apex predators had been hiding in plain sight, genuinely unaware of their own devastating superiority. The crystalline chambers of the Galactic Defense Council had never seen security measures like these. Energy barriers hummed with lethal force around the perimeter, while invisible scan fields checked every molecule of air for potential threats. Automated defense turrets tracked every movement, their alien designs bristling with weapons that could vaporize entire starships. The council members themselves wore personal shield generators, their paranoia reaching levels that would have been unthinkable just weeks before. Chairman Vexthul stood at the center of the assembly, his massive chitinous form draped in ceremonial robes that flickered with embedded holograms, showing the symbols of 12 different civilizations. His 12 eyes surveyed the gathered representatives, each one representing billions of lives hanging in the balance of what they were about to decide. "Fellow beings of the galactic community," he began, his voice amplified through translation. Matrices that carried his words to every corner of known space. "We gather today to address a threat unlike any our civilizations have ever faced. Not a threat of conquest or domination, but a threat of existence itself. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ambient sounds of the space station seemed muted, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. After careful deliberation and unanimous agreement from all member species, Chairman Vexthul continued, his voice carrying the weight of civilizations, we hereby classify all human military vessels as weapons of mass extinction. Under the Emergency Powers Clause of the Galactic Warfare Convention, these vessels are banned from participation in any interstellar conflicts, effective immediately. The formal declaration echoed through the chamber like a death knell. Representatives from species that had fought each other for millennia now sat united in their shared terror of accidentally provoking the humans who had casually demonstrated the power to end their civilizations. From the diplomatic gallery, Ambassador Lee Jong-ho rose slowly to his feet. The Korean diplomat was a study in controlled composure, his movements deliberate and precise. Those aliens who had learned to read human body language recognized the danger signs. The slight tension in his shoulders, the careful modulation of his voice, the way his hands remained perfectly still at his sides. Chairman Vexthul, Ambassador. Lee began, his voice carrying across the chamber with quiet authority. This decision appears to be fundamentally discriminatory in nature. You're essentially declaring that vessels of the Korean Space Force, and by extension all human military ships, are too dangerous to exist within your framework of acceptable warfare. The translation matrices struggled to convey the subtle menace in his tone, the way humans could make polite words sound like threats without raising their voices. This is particularly troubling, Lee continued, given that humanity has never initiated aggressive action against any galactic species. We have responded defensively to attacks, yes, but we have never been the aggressors in any conflict. Admiral Kethavar's tentacles writhed with barely controlled nervousness as he leaned forward from his position on the Council's Military Advisory Board. The Altarian had seen enough combat to recognize the signs of a predator, maintaining perfect calm before a strike. Ambassador Lee, Kethavar said, his own voice carefully modulated through diplomatic channels, surely you must understand our position. Your Captain Kim's vessel, which you classify as a routine patrol cruiser, eliminated 50 Zephyrian dreadnoughts in 17 minutes. Your recent fleet exercises involved the deployment of more concentrated firepower than most of our species have ever witnessed in their entire military history. The alien representatives murmured agreement, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of fear that the translation systems rendered into a chorus of worried voices. And yet, Ambassador Lee replied, his tone remaining dangerously calm. Despite possessing this capability, we have maintained peaceful relations with all galactic species. This ban suggests that you fear what we might do, rather than responding to what we have actually done. Dr. Hong Seung-hee, Korea's military attaché, stepped forward from her position beside the ambassador. The uniformed officer carried herself, with the professional bearing that marked Korea military personnel throughout the galaxy, but her presence sent ripples of unease through the assembled aliens who had learned to fear human military efficiency. Perhaps I can clarify Earth's position on this matter, Dr. Hong said, activating a holographic data pad that projected information visible to the entire assembly. Our defense protocols, which are a matter of public record, require that any threat to human vessels or personnel be met with proportional response. She paused, allowing the implications to sink in before continuing with deadly precision. If our ships are banned from galactic space, and any attempt is made to enforce this ban through the use of force, her words hung in the air like a sword suspended over the assembly. We would have no choice but to classify such enforcement actions as acts of war against humanity. The temperature in the chamber seemed to plummet. Several smaller alien species began chittering in their native languages, while others retreated behind additional layers of personal shielding. The implications were crystal clear. Any attempt to force compliance with the ban could trigger a defensive response from beings whose routine patrol vessels could annihilate entire fleets. What followed was the most desperate diplomatic dance in galactic history. Species that had been locked in territorial disputes for centuries suddenly discovered common ground in their shared terror of accidentally provoking human retaliation. The Zephyrian delegation, still traumatized by the casual annihilation of their legendary fleet, began frantically offering tribute agreements and mutual protection pacts. The crystalline beings from the hegemony activated their communication arrays, broadcasting surrender terms to human diplomatic channels before any hostilities could even theoretically begin. 3 different species volunteered to serve as neutral mediators, while others offered to relocate their fleets to distant star systems to avoid any possibility of misunderstanding. Meanwhile, aboard the KMS Busan, Captain Kim Ji-woo, recently promoted to admiral, was reviewing her new assignment orders with a mixture of bewilderment and professional resignation. The ship that had started this entire crisis now found herself at the center of the galaxy's most elaborate peacekeeping operation. "Let me see if I understand this correctly," Admiral Kim said to her first officer, Commander Oh Se-hun, as they reviewed the official documents that had just arrived through diplomatic channels. "The Galactic Defense Council is so concerned about our ship's capabilities that they're assigning us permanent escorts, Commander." Oh nodded, his own expression reflecting the surreal nature of their situation. 12 ships from different species, Admiral. They're calling them honor guards, but according to the briefing materials, their actual mission is to ensure that we never feel threatened enough to respond defensively. Admiral Kim shook her head in amazement. "So they're essentially assigning us bodyguards to protect other people from us." "That appears to be the situation, yes," Commander O confirmed. "Also, we've received 17 formal surrender offers from species we've never encountered before, and the hegemony has requested permission to construct a religious shrine in our honor." The Admiral walked to the bridge's main viewport, looking out at the alien vessels that had taken up protective formation around the Busan. Each ship represented a different civilization, their crews undoubtedly terrified of the human vessel they were supposed to be escorting. "And all of this," she mused aloud, "because we responded to what we thought was a pirate attack using standard shipboard weapons." Neither Admiral Kim nor her crew could have predicted that their new cultural exchange mission would accidentally usher in the most peaceful era in galactic history, as every species in known space suddenly discovered that warfare was far too dangerous when apex predators were watching. The bridge of the KMS Busan had become the unofficial center of galactic diplomacy, though Admiral Kim Ji-woo still couldn't quite believe how her simple patrol cruiser had ended up in this position. 6 months had passed since the Galactic Defense Council's emergency ban, and the changes across known space had been nothing short of revolutionary. Through the main viewport, she could see her permanent escort fleet, 12 vessels from different species that followed them everywhere like nervous puppies. The sight never failed to amuse her crew, watching massive alien warships trying to maintain formation around their relatively small Korean vessel, while clearly terrified of getting too close. "Admiral," Lieutenant Commander Yoon Ji-soo called from the communications station, her voice carrying that tone of barely suppressed laughter that had become common among the crew. "We've got another situation developing. The Centauri Trade Federation and the Outer Rim Collective are requesting human mediation for their border dispute." Admiral Kim turned from the viewport, noting the holographic star chart that showed the contested region, a small cluster of resource-rich star systems that had been fought over for nearly 2 centuries. "What's the nature of their current disagreement?" Yoon's fingers danced over her console, pulling up the relevant communications. "This is the interesting part, Admiral. Both sides are claiming they're being more peaceful than the other, and they want us to officially verify which faction is showing greater restraint." The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on anyone present. 2 civilizations that had been locked in bitter warfare for generations were now competing to see who could be less aggressive, all because they desperately wanted to impress their human observers. Dr. Nam Tai-hyung, the ship's newly appointed diplomatic specialist, looked up from his data pad with an expression of professional bewilderment. "Admiral, this marks the 43rd territorial dispute that's been resolved simply by our agreeing to observe the negotiations. We literally haven't had to say a single word during most of these sessions. Our mere presence seems to make everyone suddenly discover their peaceful nature. The transformation had been remarkable to witness firsthand. Ancient blood feuds that had raged for millennia were being set aside as former enemies scrambled to prove their peaceful intentions to humanity. Species that had communicated exclusively through weapons fire for generations were now forming elaborate diplomatic protocols and cultural exchange programs. Admiral Kim's personal communicator chimed with an incoming transmission from Captain Park Ji-ho, commander of the escort vessel KMS Incheon. His holographic image materialized above the bridge's central projection table, his expression mixing professional duty with barely contained amusement. "Admiral," Captain Park reported, "I'm currently observing the signing ceremony for the Outer Spiral Peace Accord. 7 different species are formally ending centuries of conflict and establishing a mutual defense pact. They've specifically requested that human representatives witness the ceremony." "Did they ask for any active participation from us?" Admiral Kim inquired, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Negative, ma'am. They just want us to be present during the signing. According to their diplomatic messages, they believe that having humans observe the treaty will make it blessed by the apex beings and therefore unbreakable by cosmic law." Admiral Kim rubbed her temples, a gesture that had become increasingly frequent over the past months, as she tried to process the surreal nature of their situation. "So, we've accidentally achieved religious status?" "It certainly appears that way," Dr. Nam confirmed, consulting his cultural analysis reports. 3 additional species have submitted formal applications for Korean language education programs, claiming they want to speak the tongue of the peaceful gods. The Galactic Council has also requested permission to construct a monument to human peacekeeping in the central sector. The daily reports that crossed Admiral Kim's desk painted a picture of galactic transformation that defied comprehension. Military spending across all known civilizations had plummeted by 78%. As former enemies redirected their resources toward cultural exchanges and trade agreements. Interspecies commerce had exploded, increasing by over 300%, as ancient shipping lanes reopened for the first time in generations. Most remarkably, there hadn't been a single recorded military conflict anywhere in known space for 4 consecutive months, the longest period of universal peace in recorded galactic history. Lieutenant Commander Yoon pulled up the latest intelligence reports on her holographic display. "Admiral, we're receiving updates from across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire has converted 3 of their major shipyards into civilian manufacturing centers. The hegemony has disbanded their entire offensive fleet and converted their dreadnoughts into mobile research stations." The irony was staggering. Humanity's accidental demonstration of overwhelming military superiority had frightened the galaxy into the most peaceful era anyone could remember. Former warriors were becoming diplomats, weapons were being converted into tools, and entire civilizations were reshaping themselves around the simple desire to avoid accidentally provoking the humans. As Admiral Kim prepared her evening report to Earth Command, she included a personal note that would become legendary in military archives. "Mission status, peaceful beyond all reasonable expectations. The galaxy appears to be behaving itself with remarkable consistency. Still not entirely sure why everyone is so impressed with our standard operating procedures, but diplomatic relations remain stable. Request clarification on whether we're still technically on routine patrol duty or have accidentally become galactic peacekeepers." The response from Earth Command arrived the next morning, carrying its own note of bewildered amusement. "Continue current operations. Try not to accidentally conquer anything else. Also, please advise if we need to start training diplomatic personnel for similar patrol missions." Dr. Nam looked up from his latest cultural assessment report. "Admiral, I've been analyzing the transformation patterns across galactic civilization. We've essentially achieved what philosophers, diplomats, and military strategists have dreamed about for thousands of years: universal peace through overwhelming deterrence." "The strange part," Admiral Kim mused, watching an alien cargo convoy pass peacefully through what had been a contested war zone just months earlier, "is that we accomplished this completely by accident. We thought we were just doing our job." Commander Oh Se-hun, who had been observing the escort fleet's nervous formation keeping, turned with a grin. "Admiral, maybe that's exactly why it worked. We weren't trying to intimidate anyone or establish dominance. We were just being ourselves." The galaxy had finally achieved the peace that had eluded it for millennia, and the humans responsible for this transformation remained genuinely puzzled about what all the fuss was about. They had simply responded to threats with their standard procedures, unaware that their routine capabilities would reshape the balance of power across the stars. In the end, humanity had brought peace to the galaxy not through grand strategy or diplomatic brilliance, but through the simple act of being so overwhelmingly powerful that everyone else decided fighting was no longer a viable option. The end.